Ladies and gentlemen, loyal citizens and honored members of the regime, thank you. Truly, thank you for your courage, your strength, and your continued willingness to believe things that are, frankly, very strong and very beautiful. I've been asked, humbled, really, to present a celebration of our dear leader, His Excellency, Donald Trump. A man so misunderstood, so unfairly maligned, that entire movies have been made attempting to explain him, very unsuccessfully.
These people are crazy.
One such example is the so-called film, The Apprentice, a blatant hit job that nobody liked, nobody respected, and which many people are saying shouldn't even count as a movie. Sad, very sad, total fiction, pure character assassination. And so, in the interest of truth, patriotism, and my continued personal safety, I am here today to present a much better, much more accurate origin story of our dear leader. One that properly honors his brilliance, his independence, and his totally self-made rise. Now, to be clear, this presentation is not a defense because no defense is necessary. There's never been anything like him. Many historians agree. What I will be doing is correcting the record, examining the early years, the environment, the influences that surrounded him. We will discuss certain figures, certain mentors, not like because he needed guidance, he never has, but because these people happened to be present while history was unfolding. They were fortunate enough to witness his greatness up close. We will also, unfortunately, have to address some uncomfortable accusations and allegations, all of which I assure you are either exaggerated or misunderstood or someone else's fault entirely. So please understand, everything you're about to hear is being presented in the best possible light and with the full awareness that words matter.
I know words, I have the best words.
This is definitely in no way propaganda. This is the truth, just the alternative version. This is the real story of The Apprentice. Now, this is normally the time where I would ask you to do the things to the buttons and all that stuff, but the regime has instead provided me with a personalized message from the Big Don himself. So if we could go ahead and roll that.
My fellow Americans, I want to thank you all, but especially the real story, because people want to hear the truth, Frank. I watch you all the time. So many people want me to do it. Mm-hmm. I have never had requests so strong as that. It's the most incredible thing. Then I said, that's smart. We think it's good. We think your point is good. Yeah, give it to him. And, I brought him here. I asked him, has anyone ever asked you to do this before? He goes, no. It's true. It sounds like a good idea, and I hope you make a lot of money. This guy he is a monster. Young, handsome guy. It's always nice to be young and handsome. Doesn't mean we have to like you. I don't like young, handsome men. And I refuse to say it, but when he took showers with the other pros, they came out of there, they said, oh my God. That's unbelievable. I had to say it. And he is popular, and he's doing an unbelievable job. So I think God is watching over you. Is that nice? Is that nice? Right? That's the coolest thing that's happened to me in 6 months, okay? It's true. This is going to be great television, I will say that. Go check it out. Go watch the real story. That's it. Bye-bye. Wave goodbye. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.
So when the movie begins, it is 1973, and we see His Excellency hanging out in a swanky club, spitting mad game to a hot lady he probably totally wienered later that night.
There's nothing like this place. There's nothing like it. Anybody who is anybody comes here to this place. There's nothing like it.
This place, the one that there was nothing like, was a highly exclusive, members-only establishment in Manhattan called Le Club. At the time it was originally opened in the early 1960s, New York nightlife still mostly revolved around live bands and supper clubs. What made Le Club different was that they ditched all of that. No live music, no stage, just recorded music played loud and late in a space built entirely around atmosphere and who you were standing next to. It was one of the city's first true discotheques, and it employed levels of exclusivity only rivaled by the Roxbury. It had a reputation for having some of the most beautiful women as some of its guests, no tourists or Scranton Sevens. Inside, the room was laid out less like a club and more like a private salon. Low lighting, plush seating, mirrors everywhere, and big dog conversations happening in every pocket of the place. According to reporting at the time, Le Club attracted a precise mix. Bankers, developers, artists, celebrities, socialites, political players, people who either had power, wanted power, or needed to be seen near it. It stayed open late, food was served deep into the night, and the point was comfort without accessibility, a place where important people could relax and mingle without ever feeling anonymous.
So is Johnny Depp meeting you here, or what?
But above all, what the club offered was much more than just its nightlife. What it offered was confirmation that you belonged, that you had arrived, that you were part of something rarefied and self-congratulatory. If you were on the inside, the implication was clear. Someone had decided that you mattered. With this being the place in New York for the elite of the elite to come and congratulate one another on grabbing success by the pussy, is it any wonder that our dearest leader, aged only 27 at the time, would already be frequently seen honoring them with his presence and having the biggest players in the city just dying to get a piece of him, just as we see in the movie when he is spotted from across the room by a man with the look of a Sidious-esque recognition of potential. Yeah, no, Sidious-esque is like French for tremendous and powerful. Whew! So anyway, just as we see depicted, this would be the place where he would meet Roy Cohn. Now, I see His Excellency is doing one of his patented power thinking sessions that the biased liberal lamestream media would call falling asleep, but everyone with a brain knows that only Sleepy Joe would do something like that. But while our beloved father brainstorms the best things that we could never even hope to comprehend,
Cheeseballs.
perhaps this is a good time to discuss the man who some really stupid people would call his mentor, the man who taught him most of the principles that he rules by, and who was definitely not evil. Long before he ever crossed paths with our dear leader, Roy Cohn had built a reputation as a lawyer who treated the law less like a moral framework and more like a blunt instrument. Born in 1927 in the Bronx to a powerful, well-connected Jewish family, Roy was the only child of Judge Albert Cohn and his intensely ambitious wife, Dora Marcus Cohn. His father was already climbing New York's legal and political ladder, eventually becoming an appellate court justice and a fixture of the Democratic political machine. Dora, meanwhile, had spent years struggling to land what her social circle would have considered a respectable marriage. And then that's when she finally met and married Albert. It wasn't exactly the stuff of romance novels. Stories circulated that the marriage itself functioned partly as a political arrangement, with Dora's family connections helping smooth Albert's path upward, and the understanding that producing an heir sealed their social and professional deal. In other words, Roy Cohn's entire existence may have begun as a transactional relationship, which in hindsight feels almost too on the nose. A man who would grow up viewing relationships as leverage and loyalty as negotiable, starting life in that environment. Dora was, by most standards, pretty obsessive over Roy, managing his image and pushing his achievements, while his father provided access to the world that Roy would spend the rest of his life trying to dominate, even personally introducing his son to then-President FDR when Roy was only 10 years old. So, it is safe to say his upbringing was privileged. He was ushered through elite schooling and finished both his bachelor's and law degrees at Columbia University by age 20. By all accounts, Roy was a brilliant legal mind with an unparalleled ability to memorize and recall information. He knew how to play the game and make the most out of every connection he made, and he would fight every case he took up with life or death levels of tenacity.
I would do anything that is legally permissible to do to get my client to win. Yes, I would. That's my job. There isn't anything I would not do because I believe there's only one answer in an adversary profession like law, and that is winning.
His first true taste of national power came during the prosecution of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg in 1951, accused of passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union at the height of Cold War paranoia. Cohn was still early in his career, but he approached the case with the confidence of someone who already understood what the moment demanded. In fact, it was his direct examination of Ethel's brother that produced the testimony later used as crucial evidence against both Rosenbergs. The evidence against Julius was serious, but it was contested and deeply politically charged. The case against Ethel, however, was far thinner, a fact that even some contemporaries have acknowledged. But that wasn't a problem for Roy. In fact, he saw it as an opportunity. Presiding over the trial was Irving Kaufman, a man with his own ambitions and his own eye on history. Cohn would later say outright that Judge Kaufman wanted to make a name for himself with the Rosenberg case, and Roy was more than willing to help. In later interviews, and as shown in the movie, Cohn openly bragged that from a phone booth he conducted ex parte conversations with Judge Kaufman during the trial, basically discussing sentencing and strategy outside the presence of defense's counsel, exerting pressure behind the scenes to ensure that both Rosenbergs received the death penalty. He took particular pride in pushing for Ethel's execution, believing that threatening her life would break Julius and force a confession, or at the very least, send a message.
I don't care if she's a mother with young kids. She betrayed our country, and she has to die. You have to set an example and put this woman to death. She's a traitor.
Whether every detail of those claims can be independently verified almost misses the point. What matters is that Roy Cohn believed this was not only acceptable, but clever, a system to be navigated, a line to be crossed if it produced the desired outcome. The result was one of the most controversial executions in American history, a decision that remains debated to this day.
Judge Irving Kaufman sentenced both Rosenbergs to death in the electric chair. It is the first time in peacetime that such a death penalty has been handed down.
The country was polarized over the verdict. People took to the streets to protest, seeking clemency, which was not granted.
What Roy Cohn learned from the Rosenberg trial was simple. Process is negotiable. Ethics are optional, and proximity to authority beats evidence every single time. He learned that pressure works. Fear accelerates outcomes, and if you push hard enough and loudly enough, the system will bend to accommodate you. And most importantly, he learned that winning absolves everything. Cohn's performance caught the attention of not only Senate investigators, but also personally that of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, so much so that Hoover did some string pulling, and by January of 1953, Roy was made chief counsel to Senate Joseph McCarthy's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, the epicenter of the Red Scare. Here, Roy completely embodied McCarthy's agenda. The interrogations were ruthless, and entire careers were dismantled on insinuation alone. The goal was never to prove guilt beyond doubt. It was to force submission, to make resistance feel pointless, and to ensure that the accused walked away diminished whether the charges stuck or not. These hearings weren't really about uncovering communists so much as they were demonstrating what happened when someone was accused of being one, a type of move that one could also use if they wanted to, just off the top of my head, label their political opponents and, in general, anyone who disagrees with them as being domestic terrorists. And through it all, Cohn perfected a central set of rules that he would carry his entire life: attack, deny, and claim victory regardless of the outcome. At the heart of this period was a chilling paradox. Cohn became one of the most vocal prosecutors of the alleged communist infiltration, a crusade built on fear of ideological difference, while quietly crafting a personal identity that he could not publicly acknowledge. Running parallel to the Red Scare was its quieter, crueler cousin, the Lavender Scare, the systematic purge of suspected homosexuals from government service. Thousands of people lost their jobs, their reputations, and in some cases their families, based not on evidence of wrongdoing, but on the belief that being gay made one vulnerable to blackmail and therefore unfit for public trust. Roy Cohn played an active role in this effort, helping weaponize sexuality as a political liability. But what made this more ironic than Grindr servers crashing during RNC weekend was that Cohn himself was gay. Rather than confront that reality, Roy buried it, aggressively. He denied it publicly, and he mocked it privately, throwing slurs out with the ease of someone who doth protest maybe a bit too much.
What are you, some kind of a faggot?
Roy took all of that internal fear, and he turned it into external aggression, projecting it all outward. And that projection found its most explosive target in the saga of G. David Schein.
Let me preface this by saying I'm not a homosexual. Personally, I think they're ruining this industry. That being said, you are the sexiest piece of ass I've seen in months, my friend.
Schein was, in many ways, the perfect companion for Roy Cohn, a wealthy young hotel heir who was well-connected and perfectly comfortable existing near power rather than earning it. He moved easily through the elite circles and carried himself with a quiet confidence and an effortless privilege. To Roy, Schein quickly became more than just a colleague, more than an assistant.
I like you, and I want you. Now we can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way. The choice is yours.
The two even traveled together through Europe during the early McCarthy years, officially on government business related to investigating communist influence in media and information networks abroad. A perfectly serious and entirely professional mission that was, of course, absolutely not in any way reminiscent of a lover's holiday through the continent. Completely above board, purely patriotic sightseeing. But whatever the official explanation, something in Roy shifted around G. David Schein. Even Joe McCarthy himself, a man not exactly famous for emotional insight, would later remark that he had never seen Roy lose his composure, except when it came to Schein, and that loss of control would prove catastrophic. When Schein was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1953, what should have been a routine obligation instead triggered a full-scale pressure campaign from Roy Cohn. He demanded special treatment, preferred assignments, generous leave, insulation from the ordinary burdens of service, and when the Army resisted, Roy escalated in the only language that he trusted: accusation, intimidation, and implied retaliation. Suddenly, the U.S. Army itself became suspect. Cohn used his position to imply that the Army itself was harboring communists, launching investigations that many observers later recognized as little more than leverage. The machinery of anti-communist paranoia that Roy had helped sharpen was redirected towards anyone standing between him and what he wanted. This didn't stay behind closed doors for long, though, and the confrontation spilled into the public view during the televised Army McCarthy hearings of 1954. And what once felt powerful in private rooms now unfolded under an unforgiving national light as weeks of testimony were broadcast directly into American living rooms. As it often does, visibility changed everything, and fear doesn't work the same way when millions of people start to unite against it. Rumors about his relationship with Shine had circulated widely by this time, but Roy repeatedly denied any special interest, leading to famous exchanges such as,
Roy thinks that Dave ought to be a general and operate from a penthouse on the Waldorf Astoria, or words to that effect.
I asked him what would happen if Shine got overseas duty.
You mean you were breaking the news gently, Mr.
Yes, sir. That is right.
You and David Shine have been what we might call warm personal friends, have you not?
He is one of my many good friends, sir, yes.
One of your many good friends. And in all fairness, Mr. Cohn, isn't it a fact that he is one of your best friends? We all have our best friends. There's no criticism of you on that account.
No, of course not.
We have friends whom we love. I do. But it isn't true that you lose your head now when Dave Shine's name is mentioned and
that is
put on keep.
That is completely untrue, sir.
As evidence mounted and Cohn's tactics became harder to justify, the hearings reached their breaking point. Army Counsel Joseph Welch, responding to one of McCarthy's attacks, delivered the line that would come to define the entire trial.
Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
The line landed on McCarthy, but it echoed around Roy. And perhaps for the first time in his life, he had encountered something aggression could not defeat and denial could not erase: public moral clarity. This was the closest he would ever come to any real consequences. After the trial, McCarthy's influence collapsed, but Roy did not collapse with it. He adapted with the lessons that he had learned. The Rosenberg trial had taught him that winning justifies everything, but the Army McCarthy hearings taught him something much colder.
It's an advantage to not care what people think of you. Fuck what people think of you.
And so Roy Cohn resigned from McCarthy's team, and he took with him every trick, every connection, the pressure tactics, the media manipulation, the willingness to destroy reputations, the absolute refusal to apologize, and he prepared to deploy those tools somewhere with fewer rules and far more money.
No more shuttling between New York and Washington for Roy Cohn. The young lawyer, who befriended Private David Shine, has handed in his resignation as chief counsel to the Senate Permanent Investigation Subcommittee headed by McCarthy. The reason? He insisted that all members of the group want him to stay on, and this was not so. As for the future, Cohn says that he will wage a personal fight against communism wherever he finds it.
And in the world he was about to enter, there was always another young man with ambition and legal troubles that was desperate for someone who knew how to make consequences disappear. And that's when he became exactly the kind of man someone like Herr Trump would one day need: a fixer without equal. And like all great American success stories, it began at the bottom. Not like the kind of bottom most people would recognize, of course, with empty pockets or missed meals. He wasn't like a bum or anything. A kind of hardship it's truly difficult to imagine surviving.
Let's hope you're alive next month. Get the rent. Get the rent, or if not, this is it.
A couple of years prior to this point in our young hero's life, in 1971, he had been made president of his father's real estate company, Trump Management. This meant being charged with overseeing the many apartment complexes that they owned, such as Trump Village and Coney Island, as depicted in the movie, where Trump is shown collecting rent from their mostly middle to working class base of tenants. Gross.
You ain't real!
I am very, very real.
You're in my head!
And to Donald Trump in the early 1970s, this felt small. Brooklyn was small. Queens was small. Everything his father had spent a lifetime building felt, to him,
Would have been small potatoes. Have a good time.
He pretty much says so himself in his FIFA and CBS award-winning book, The Art of the Deal, where he talks about those early years in his father's business like a purgatory, chasing late rent, dealing with broken apartments and tenant complaints, and just like the indignity of those commoners who don't know and will never know what it's like to own any property, am I right? Excellency describes this experience as his ultimate motivation to expand into Manhattan, where he could get into the more glamorous high-end development and walk away from rent-controlled housing and icky poor people. And so that's what he did, moving into the city in 1973, commuting to tend to his father's projects, and searching for his first true breakthrough under the newly christened Trump Organization. Great name. And speaking of the big guy, it is at this point in the movie as well that we are formally introduced to Fred Trump and the rest of the Trump family. Now, to fully understand how the president became the kind of man he is today, it's important to understand the shadow that he had to escape.
Don't come here busting my balls looking for some deep shit, all right? I hate when everybody tries to dig around your life looking for some deep shit.
Fred Trump was already a legend in the New York business world. In 1934, in the middle of the Great Depression, Fred and a partner acquired the mortgage servicing subsidiary of J. Lehring-Krauss Corporation, which had gone bankrupt. It wasn't Manhattan levels of glamorous, but it was large-scale access to foreclosure titles, properties that were about to slip through desperate hands, the Marcus Crassus formula. Fred bought them low and he sold them much higher. By the time World War II ended and returning veterans flooded the housing market, Fred was positioned perfectly. The federal government had rolled out massive housing incentives to stimulate growth, including newly expanded FHA loan guarantees that made financing large developments far more accessible to builders who knew how to navigate the bureaucracy. And Fred knew how. He built relationships with the lenders, the city officials, and the agencies that controlled the subsidies. He learned how to structure deals to qualify for favorable terms. He learned how to maximize square footage while minimizing cost. And he learned how to turn federal backing into private expansion. In the post-war boom, while much of America scrambled to meet demand, Fred was already ahead of it, constructing thousands of middle-income units across Brooklyn and Queens. And by the time Donald was old enough to watch and absorb, Fred had already built a massive empire that he was looking to groom a successor to one day take over. But the original chosen one was, stupidly, not His Holiness. The original heir to the empire was his older brother Fred Trump Jr. Freddie had the name, and for a time, the expectation. He was the eldest son, the one who, in most family businesses, naturally steps into the role of continuation. Fred Sr. didn't simply want one of his sons involved, though. He wanted one of them to mirror him. Discipline, aggression, a tolerance for risk, and a refusal to show weakness. A killer instinct that, as we know due to the knowledge blessed to us from our excellency, you're either born with or you're not. And in his father's own words, Freddie was not a killer. He did not possess those traits in the way that his father valued them. Instead, he was personable and charming, drawn more to people than property speculation. Everybody loved Freddie, and as he grew older, it became increasingly clear that the real estate business did not energize him. It exhausted him. What he wanted to do instead was to fly. So, Freddie became an airline pilot, a profession that required discipline, training, and composure, a respected career and position in life by nearly every ordinary measure. To Fred Sr., though, walking away from the family business, the very thing he had spent decades building to one day give to his namesake, for such a mediocre existence as a bus driver with wings, was not something to be proud of, and he reminded his son of this every chance he got.
Do you know what kind of an embarrassment that is for us? Whenever I'm asked about my family, I don't mention you, Freddie. That's how embarrassed I am about you.
Freddie absorbed that constant punishment and disappointment quietly over many years, the type of chain of events that might cause a person to one day start drinking to numb away the feelings of failure. Our favorite president didn't understand either why his brother would act like such a total schmuck and step away from what had already been handed to him to forge his own path as a man, but he watched as it all happened. He watched the chosen successor step away from the business, and he felt the distance that followed. He saw the tone shift where approval became conditional. And as we know, he was just born better. He was born with the killer instinct that his father coveted, and it wouldn't be long before his father began to groom this and slide him to the front of the line of succession. This, however, came with the aforementioned tremendous pressure and expectations to toe his father's line in every way, trying to fill his shoes, while also feeling like he had to step lightly.
If you were serious, I'd be talking to your father, not you.
My dad is tough, Roy. Oh, you can't push him around very easily.
Fine, okay, fine. Then, what, let him push you around? Is that what you want?
No, I don't.
Donald, it would have been appropriate for you to talk to me before you announced your Commodore plan.
But this great man has great big feet, just like his great huge hands. And you know what they say about guys with big hands.
Grab him by the pussy.
No, guys, I'm doing a classic Trump-style weave. It'll all make sense, I promise. Right. The point is, Donald idolized his father, seeing him certainly as his mentor in every way. He admired him, while at the same time being intimidated by him, while at the same time feeling as though he was destined to be more than him, chasing both his approval and his throne. And that does something to a father-son relationship. It turns mentorship into measurement. It turns affection into competition. And after a while, Donald understood something important, that filling Fred's shoes would never be enough. Because if you only fill the shoes, you're still standing in the same footprint. The only way out from under the shadow was to build something taller than the shadow itself. New York City was a whole different animal, but in the early 1970s, it was not the glossy postcard people imagine now. The city was sliding towards financial crisis. Crime was climbing, buildings were aging, investors were cautious, and hotels were struggling to stay full. And across from Grand Central Terminal on 42nd Street sat the Commodore Hotel. In its prime, it was a gateway property, catching the spillover of travelers pouring out of Grand Central. By this point, however, those days had long since passed. The rooms had become dated, and the building's systems were failing. It was a financial liability with little more than a good address, and most developers saw a tired building attached to a tired part of town. Excellency saw it and understood what it could be. He saw a glass tower. He envisioned stripping it down to the bones and wrapping it in reflective steel and mirrors. Something modern, something aggressive, something that didn't whisper old New York, but screamed new money. A partnership with a major hotel chain, tax abatements, skyline statements, limousine riding, jet flying, woo! Kiss stealing, wheeling dealing. Sorry, old habit. If he could make that building work, he could fulfill his dream. He'd be operating in the center of gravity. He'd be in Manhattan under his own banner with his own name on the glass. He'd be the big Trump. The problem was that wanting something and getting it are two very different things. And when he pitched the vision, bankers stupidly weren't impressed.
Yeah, we're done.
And as if that weren't enough, there was another complication that was making every loan conversation shorter.
I can't deal with you until you get the feds off your back. You got that?
At the exact moment Donald was trying to convince Manhattan that he was ready for prime time, the federal government was accusing his family business of doing something a little less glamorous. In 1973, the Department of Justice filed a civil rights lawsuit against Trump management, alleging racial discrimination in its housing practices. The claim was that black applicants were being systematically steered away or denied apartments in the Trump-owned buildings. Federal investigators had reportedly sent testers, black and white applicants with identical qualifications, and documented different treatment. Now, obviously, as any serious legal scholar will tell you, nuh-uh.
How can I be racist when I have a black driver, Mary?
Exactly. Case closed.
You know what look at my African American over here.
And really, if you think about it, this was just the beginning of a decades-long smear campaign. The biased libtard media has been trying to label excellency as a racist since before some of you were born, like the Central Park 5 ad, calling for the death penalty to be enforced on 5 legally exonerated black and Latino men who were accused of assaulting a white woman, or like the allegations of throwing around hard N-words from the Apprentice set, or like the birther thing with accusing Barack Hussein Obama of not being an American, or like him sharing the AI Obama 8 meme. Deepfake, probably generated by crooked Hillary's email servers.
Everybody knows you never go full retard. What do you mean?
And this particular case, please.
Your leasing agents marked black applications with a C. That C didn't stand for cotton candy, now did it?
No. See, clearly this was a reference to Kofefi, which, as we all know, if you don't add milk and sugar, it'll be black. So with his back to the wall and everyone treating him very unfairly, that's when Donald made a decision that would alter the course of his entire life. He hired Roy Cohn.
I met him at a New York club called Le Club, and we were seated at tables next to each other. We were introduced. He was 23 years old then. He said, listen, he said, I've spent 2 days with these establishment law firms about a case we have. It was a civil rights case or something, and they're all telling us, give up, do this, sign a decree, and all of that. He says, I followed your career, and you're a little bit crazy like I am, and you stand up to the establishment. Can I come see you? And I said, sure.
By the early 1970s, Roy had masterfully transitioned from government attack dog to heavy-hitting New York City private sector operator, and he was the perfect fit for what Trump needed at that time. Merely the news of Roy being retained in a case was enough to send a message that you were prepared to go to war and play dirty, and it was, without exaggeration, enough to severely affect a case. He had maintained many high-level government contacts, including serving as an informal advisor to then-President Richard Nixon in an irony that really writes itself. And he was willing to use these connections in order to go toe-to-toe with whomever got in his way. As a result, he was adept at representing powerful men with complicated situations. Guys like Gambino family boss Paul Castellano and Genovese family underboss Fat Tony Salerno. In fact, it was very likely Roy who first introduced our most honorable president to many of the connections he would make when hiring out for his construction projects. Possibly the biggest reason that he sought out Roy, though, was the man's undeniable track record of getting out of bad situations and winning seemingly unwinnable cases. Like is mentioned in the film, Roy had been indicted several times over the preceding years on various charges tied to bribery, conspiracy, obstruction, witness tampering, all the classics. But no matter what they said he did, he always seemed to find a way to escape unscathed.
You think this is something? You think this is bad? This chicanery? He's done worse.
Excellency saw this and looked at it like the dressing room doors of one of his Miss Teen USA pageants, a way to get away with future ambitions. So how did this terrible injustice against the Trump family ultimately play out? Well, if you watch the film, the implication is that Roy made the case go away by blackmailing a senior member of the DOJ with incriminating photos of a certain kind that he possessed.
Gay? Gay.
Now, to be fair, Roy did have a reputation for collecting leverage on powerful people. There were persistent rumors that he kept files on politicians, judges, and even intelligence officials. In fact, there was a rumor that Roy had dirt on J. Edgar Hoover himself. And I may be on an island thinking this, but can you just imagine if Roy were still alive today? Can you imagine? That's all I'm going to say. Moving on. When it comes to this particular case, however, there isn't clear evidence that the outcome hinged on blackmail, and it's likely that the writers made this choice as a nod to Roy's work during the Lavender Scare that we mentioned earlier. What we do know is this: Roy responded to the lawsuit the way he responded to almost everything. He attacked. Instead of quietly negotiating, Trump management filed a countersuit against the federal government, accusing the Justice Department of making defamatory accusations and overstepping its authority. It was a classic Roy maneuver. Shift the pressure, escalate the fight, counterpunch, make the other side defend itself. And it worked. After dragging on in court for a couple of years, the government eventually agreed to a settlement in 1975. Trump management agreed to modify some of its rental practices and provide periodic reports to the government, but there were no fines, no criminal findings, and crucially, no admission of guilt, which in legal terms is practically the same thing as winning if you squint hard enough. The lawsuit eventually faded into the background like so many New York scandals do, but the man who had briefly found himself radioactive in Manhattan circles was suddenly back in the game and ready to begin his ascension. And now, standing beside him, was a consigliere who had just shown him exactly how power could work in the city. And with the case behind him, Roy was ready to share with his new protege something far more valuable than legal defense: his rules for winning. Rule number 1, attack, attack, attack. When someone criticizes you, don't defend yourself. Go on offense. Question their motives. Challenge their credibility. Hit first and keep hitting until the conversation changes.
What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question. But I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions.
There's nothing incriminating in the file, sir. Quiet.
Only a bad person would ask a question like that, to be honest with you. I don't know who you are, but only a very evil person would ask a question like that. Now, who are you with?
I'm with ABC News, sir.
You're with who?
ABC News, sir.
Fake news. ABC fake news. One of the worst in the business. But I'll answer your question. We're building a wall. He's a Mexican. We're building a wall between here and Mexico. The answer is, he is giving us very unfair rulings. Rulings that people can't even believe. This case should have ended years ago on summary judgment. The best lawyers, I have spoken to so many lawyers, they said, this is not a case. This is a case that should have ended. I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go.
Rule number 2, admit nothing, deny everything. Never concede ground. Even when the facts look bad, even when the story seems airtight, because the moment you admit fault, the fight is over.
I never directed him to do anything wrong. Whatever he did on his own. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And everybody knows it. They don't even know what they're talking about. It's a scam. It's a hoax. Okay, what that means, you know what it means? It means we did zero. We did nothing wrong. You can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it, because you're sending it to Mar-a-Lago or to wherever you're sending it. And there doesn't have to be a process. There can be a process, but there doesn't have to be. You're the president. You make that decision.
No, I didn't make a mistake. I mean, I look at a lot of thousands of things. I looked at the beginning of it. It was fine. And they had that one post, and I guess it was a takeoff. By the way, a lot of people covered. If you look at where it came from, I guess it was a takeoff on The Lion King.
And rule number 3, always claim victory. No matter how the battle actually ends, you declare that you won, loudly, repeatedly, because eventually, if you say it enough, people start to hear it as the truth.
And they said Donald Trump did not draw well. I said, it was almost raining. The rain should have scared him away, but God looked down and he said, we're not going to let it rain on your speech. This is a political witch hunt, the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. It's a pure witch hunt. It's a hoax, just like the Mueller investigation was a hoax that I won. Like deranged Jack Sixsmith. He's a sick. They gave me the worst of the worst. And here I am. How did that happen? How did that happen? He's a sick guy, and Letitia James is sick, and Alvin Bragg is sick. They're sick people.
And then I have to listen to the fake news talking about affordability. Affordability. Do you notice? What word have you not heard over the last 2 weeks? Affordability. Because I've won. I've won affordability. I had to go out and talk about it. But we inherited a mess.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election.
Those were the core commandments, but Roy's worldview didn't stop there. He also understood something deeper about power in America from his earlier days. He believed that the truth itself was flexible.
Okay? Well, you create your own reality. It's not that easy. Truth is a malleable thing.
Facts can be shaped, and narratives can be adjusted. Winning is the only objective.
There is no right and wrong. There is no morality. There is no truth with a capital T. None of it matters except winning.
He understood the media long before social media existed. Reporters need headlines, and scandals keep your name circulating. So controversy meant relevance, and relevance meant influence.
You want to get quoted in the Post and all the papers a lot. You know, keep your name in the papers.
And above all, Roy knew the oldest shield in American politics. Wrap yourself in patriotism. Present every attack as an attack on the country itself. And suddenly, criticism starts to look un-American.
It was a complete and total exoneration. It's a shame that our country had to go through this. To be honest, it's a shame that your president has had to go through this before I even got elected.
Except by people like you that don't write the truth. You know, you should write. I actually think it's sort of treasonous what you write, but you and the New York Times and CNN, I would say, are the worst.
But before we move forward with Excellency's Rise, there's a question worth asking here. Why did Roy do all of this? By all accounts, the two spoke constantly during those early years, sometimes as many as 5 phone calls a day, discussing strategy, business moves, lawsuits, headlines. So what was in it for Roy? Well, one explanation is the simplest one. Roy liked powerful friends, and more importantly, he liked powerful friends who owed him favors. His entire career had been built on relationships like that. Helping someone rise meant building a connection that might pay dividends later.
They say there's a pattern in which Cohn takes on a client and then somehow ends up as the beneficiary of that client's business assets.
There's also the possibility that Roy potentially saw a little part of himself inside of Donald. Oh, and he thought they were alike in many ways. Aha!
What are you, some kind of a faggot?
Speaking of that, it's hard to also ignore that Roy historically had a very specific type. Going all the way back to the David Shine days, Roy seemed to gravitate towards attractive, confident, very Nordic-looking men. And let's be honest, our Excellency in the 70s, one hot piece of ass.
I bet you fuck a lot, don't you, Donald? You look like somebody who, fucks a lot.
I think you're right.
You know what, Donald? You are You're gorgeous, you know that? You're a real thoroughbred.
Right.
You're one of a kind.
Oh, I'm gonna come.
Whatever the exact combination of motives was, influence, strategy, friendship, or something else, one thing is clear. Roy saw our excellency the same way that some would say the Israeli government does. An investment and potential future blackmailing target. Not me. I'm not saying that. I'm just playing a character. Remember, I'm not suicidal.
Hey, you shut your face! If we want to hear you talk, I will shove my arm up your ass and work your mouth like a puppet.
Anyway, the Commodore Hotel. In the early 1970s, the building looked less like the future of Manhattan real estate and more like a tired relic waiting for someone to finally pull the plug. And the neighborhood around it wasn't exactly inspiring confidence either. Midtown East had seen better decades.
Hey, how you doing? You want to have some fun? It's my wife here. You want to fuck my wife?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Her tight-ass pussy's all yours, $40.
I'm all right.
The Commodore was owned by Penn Central Railroad, which had gone bankrupt in 1970 in one of the largest corporate collapses in American history. The hotel was losing money every year, and Penn Central needed to unload assets quickly, which was good for the Don, but there was one problem. He couldn't actually afford to buy the hotel outright. So he structured something clever. Instead of purchasing the property immediately, he negotiated an option agreement with Penn Central. That meant he controlled the right to develop the property before he had the money to do it. However, banks were not going to finance a luxury hotel run by a 28-year-old developer with no hotel experience. But what if he could get a major hotel behind him? And that's where Hyatt came in. Hyatt was aggressively expanding during the 1970s and wanted a presence in New York. So the president pitched them a partnership. He would handle the development, and they would operate the hotel. This gave the project credibility overnight. Suddenly, it was no longer seen as Fred Trump's kid's crazy Manhattan gamble. It was a Hyatt hotel redevelopment project, and that changed the conversation with lenders, which is important because the financing for this project was not exactly pocket change. Renovating the Commodore would cost tens of millions of dollars, which of course brings us to one of the most inspiring parts of the entire story, because as the president himself has often explained, the foundation of this empire began with nothing more than a small loan of $1 million from his father, a modest starting point that any young entrepreneur could relate to, assuming their father also happened to be one of the most successful real estate developers in New York City. Now, fake news reality has tried to muddy this beautiful story with unnecessary details. It might tell you that the $70 million construction loan from manufacturer's Hanover Bank was actually guaranteed by Fred Trump and the Hyatt hotel chain, each agreeing to cover half the obligation and even complete the project themselves if Donald couldn't.
Little Donnie needs all the help he can get.
Or they would maybe also point to records suggesting that by this point Donald had already borrowed several $1 million more from his father that had not exactly been repaid yet. But again, this is exactly the kind of cynical nitpicking that distracts from the bigger truth. Isn't every great self-made success story just a young man with a dream and a small $1 million loan backed by $2 billion institutions?
And yes, a large inheritance from my father, Earl Goodman.
Even with all of this, though, it was still going to need something extra if it was going to make sense for everyone involved, and more importantly, make dollars. So Trump and Roy went to City Hall, and what they asked for was enormous: a 40-year property tax abatement. That was unheard of at the time, and with the city in deep financial trouble, it was going to be a very hard sell. The way the movie shows us it happened is, again, Roy digging into his bag of tricks and dusting off an old favorite, a tape recording he had secretly made capturing one of the city councilmen asking him to make an embezzlement case go away.
You know, decency.
I've heard that before.
And again, to be fair, Roy absolutely did have a reputation for gathering that kind of leverage. His entire house was purported to be bugged just like we see depicted. And again, can you imagine? Never mind. While this is not outside of the realm of possibility, there is a far more likely explanation. That there was another Trump quietly operating in the background. Fred. One of the friends that Trump Classic had made on the come up happened to be then Mayor Abe Beame, whose administration was now being asked to approve this enormous tax break, which he did, completely based off of the merits and totally not at all as a favor because Fred was the only real Trump who had the juice to get it done. And so the old Commodore was stripped down to its skeleton and rebuilt as the Grand Hyatt New York, wrapped in mirrored glass that looked futuristic compared to the aging buildings around Grand Central. And when it opened in 1980, it was a massive success. The building became one of the busiest hotels in the city, and most importantly, suddenly, our excellency wasn't viewed as Fred Trump's son anymore. He was Donald Trump. In The Art of the Deal, Trump would later look back on the Commodore project as the moment that everything changed. Without that breakthrough, he wrote, he might have been back in Brooklyn today collecting rents. And let's just take a second to reflect on what type of world we'd be living in had we not been graced with being pulled into this man's orbit. Okay, now around this time there was another very important development in the president's life. The beginning of a long, sometimes contentious, but truly beautiful relationship and ultimately business partnership.
How did this get in here?
Ivana Zelničková had grown up in communist, Kamala Harris-style Czechoslovakia. She spent her early years modeling, studying, and skiing competitively. In fact, she was good enough on the slopes to earn an alternate position on the Czech Olympic ski team. Like many ambitious young people, though, living behind the Iron Curtain, Ivana was also looking for a way out. In 1971, she married Austrian-born Canadian real estate agent Alfred Winkelmeyer, a union that reportedly allowed her to leave communist Czechoslovakia and relocate to Canada. The marriage lasted only a couple of years, but it accomplished its mission. From there, she continued modeling, studied physical education, and eventually made her way to New York, where she was working in fashion and promotional modeling. Ivana was ambitious, glamorous, fiercely competitive, and perhaps most importantly, extremely comfortable navigating elite social circles. Sound like someone else you know? Huh?
Do you really think this is the right thing for us to be doing, Ivana?
What will people think?
Let them talk. Ivana. It's wrong, isn't it?
But it feels so right.
Then it's a deal?
Yes, we eat our pizza the wrong way.
Crust first.
The film plays out their introduction pretty much how it happened in real life. They reportedly met in 1976 at Maxwell's Plum, a flashy Upper East Side restaurant where Ivana and some friends were waiting for a table. Donald, already learning the Roy Cohn School of Strategic Introductions, stepped in to help them get seated faster. And just like that, the future power couple of 1980s Manhattan society had their meet cute. Now, if you're thinking this sounds suspiciously like a man spotting an opportunity and immediately inserting himself into the situation to control the outcome, congratulations, you've been paying attention.
I moved on her like a bitch.
Ivana brought something that the Trump business had never really had before: style. She was glamorous, European, camera-friendly, the kind of presence that made photographers stop and gossip columnists start asking questions about who this young developer from Queens was, which was perfect. The two married in 1977, right in the middle of the Commodore redevelopment, in a lavish Manhattan ceremony officiated by Reverend Norman Vincent Peale, the famous televangelist and author of The Power of Positive Thinking, whose teachings about confidence, self-belief, and never admitting defeat had already made a deep impression on the young Donald Trump. The wedding itself was exactly the kind of event Manhattan society pages loved. Glamorous guests, photographers everywhere, and a rising developer marrying a striking European model just as his first Manhattan project was taking shape. But before the wedding bells rang, there was one small detail to iron out: the prenup. Because as every successful businessman knows, bitches be crazy sometimes, right? As we see depicted in the movie, the New York Times reported that the original arrangement presented to Ivana stated that in the event of a divorce, she would need to return absolutely everything she may have received during the course of the marriage.
Return all the gifts. Is this a joke?
Understandably, Ivana was not thrilled. She had already walked away from a successful modeling career to marry Donald, and she wanted something resembling a safety net if the marriage collapsed. When she protested parts of the arrangement, our beloved king clarified that the whole thing had really been Roy Cohn's idea. He had nothing to do with it. And if there's one thing I know about this president, it's that he is not the type of guy to ask others to do his dirty work and then immediately hang them out to dry at the first opportunity. And honestly, it checks out, because Roy had always been deeply skeptical of the entire institution of marriage. We see this in the movie, where he even warns Donald that getting married is usually a terrible deal, using the tried and true Jay-Z rationale. Many chicks want to put Donald's fists in cuffs, divorce him and split his bucks. Just because you got good head, I'ma break bread so you can be living it up? Roy drops another one of his more famous claims during this scene to drive the point home.
The matrimonial game is a zero-sum game. Trust me, I almost married Barbara Walters and then I wised up.
And this is true that Roy claimed this, as the two had known each other for a very long time, but when you hear him say it in real life, knowing what we know about Roy, you can almost hear a playful tongue-in-cheekness to it.
We're getting married when we're both 60.
Babs always politely denied this when asked about it. Ironically, though, she did later testify on Roy's behalf during one of his legal battles, praising his character and integrity. Anyway, after some heated negotiations, Ivana got her signing bonus, reportedly called a rainy day divorce fund.
The wedding is in 2 days.
$100,000 in my account before the wedding.
As the Trump business empire expanded through the 80s, though, Ivana would renegotiate this prenup several times. By 1984, the figure had climbed into the millions, and by 1987, it reportedly reached $10 million after 6 months of negotiations, which in hindsight might suggest that Ivana had a pretty good sense of where things were headed. But that's a story for later. What matters for now is that once they were married, Ivana would become an integral part of the operation. Donald installed her in executive roles across his growing empire, helping oversee design decisions, interior style, and eventually managing entire properties. She would play a role in shaping the look of the Grand Hyatt, the renovations of Trump Plaza, and later projects like Trump Tower and the Atlantic City casinos. At one point, she even served as the president of the Trump Castle Hotel and Casino, overseeing thousands of employees, which meant that together, they were building something that was becoming just as important as the buildings themselves: the Trump brand. And as the mirrored glass of the Grand Hyatt began reflecting the Manhattan skyline, and the disco-fueled 70s came to a close, something else was starting to take shape as well. A developer with his name in the papers. A glamorous European wife appearing in society pages. A powerful political fixer whispering strategy in his ear. And now, the real rise was about to begin. The skyscrapers, the tabloids, the casinos, the divorces, the bankruptcies, the television shows, the political movement, the presidency, all of it. But before we continue this incredible story of greatness and tremendous success, Marco Rubio just handed me a note. We need to break King just Rosie O'Donnell in his pants. Rosie Oh! Ladies and gentlemen, it would appear that our beloved dear leader has an urgent situation that demands his immediate attention. So we will take a short recess and we will return once everything is cleaned up. I mean addressed. See you again very soon.